Hi guys, and welcome to this next video for Unit 6.2, Environmental Risks. This is for Paper 3. You need to use this video in conjunction with the departmental website, and it's also be advantageous if you have a copy of the course companion in front of you. So in this unit, in this video, we'll be looking at the concept of carbon footprints and global flows. Consistently through this unit, we've tried to build up the understanding that because a product travels a long distance doesn't necessarily mean it has a large carbon footprint. So we're going to focus in now the example of the wine industry. So you can see here, in the case of Napa Valley wines, that's wines produced in the United States of America, they tend to be transported across America from California to, for example, New York City and Chicago by truck. Now you can see the irony here is that even though that's a comparatively short distance to a wine being transported by container ship from Australia, the carbon footprint of that wine is not just substantially, but quite considerably larger. And that's because of the mode of transportation. So don't be fooled into thinking that just because a product has a large number of transportation miles, in the case of food miles, it's necessarily bad. So quite often companies have used the idea that food that has been produced in a local area has a low number of food miles doesn't necessarily equate to a low carbon footprint. Of course, carbon footprint is only one of those components of the overall environmental footprint of the product. So it's actually quite complex. And this one here, in particular, where you look at wines being transported from France to the United States, the first part of the journey is there by container ship across the Atlantic Ocean. And then it's put on, in this example, it's put onto a truck and transported to New York City, or even a truck and transported from the port to Chicago. So from New York City to Chicago by truck, you will see that there is a substantially larger carbon footprint to the truck element of the journey. So again, these issues are very, very complex, and you can't just use very simplified measures like carbon footprints or like food miles to understand the true impact of a product. It's actually quite a complex process. So again, we have looked at already beef production and soybean production that's focused in Brazil. And obviously those products do have a considerable number of food miles associated with them. So if we actually start looking into the idea here, that we got the concept of embodied carbon. And that's similar to a water footprint. So we're going to take a look at other goods and carbon footprints. So food are not the only ones that we can have a look at. That's these examples of carbon footprints and how those global interactions and global flows contribute to those carbon footprints. So here on this map with the arrows that show the direction of travel, you can see the size of the net transfer of CO2. So you can see as we build up both the density and the node density and the number of journeys being made and the capacity of the networks, you can see that as we build up that global network, that there is an increase in the carbon footprint. So as our global interactions do rise and our global consumption does rise, then of course that's going to have a knock-on effect on the environment. One thing to consider, that the process itself of globalization, which makes products more affordable, also itself drives forward consumption. We all consume a lot more. For example, we buy a lot more clothes than we did 30 years ago because the clothes are so much cheaper now. So we get this interplay between the process of globalization causes environmental impacts. The process of globalization also reduces the cost of the product. So this in itself stimulates the growth of global trade. So there's an interplay there between the two factors. Another one are carbon flows and people. For this one, you need to have a read of page 633. So this is an example of where migration has been, and the refugees has been hijacked by certain politicians, and refugees are being blamed for carbon footprints. I do find this rhetoric absolutely incredible. However, we do have to recognise that in the transportation industry and the tourism industry, that global flow of people does have a significant impact on carbon footprints of the world. At the making of this video, we're currently seeing a significant downturn in global travel because of the corona-19 virus. And we've actually seen, because of that reduction in travel and because of the reduction in factory produce, we've actually seen a significant measurable improvement in the quality of our air. But we're going to look at this example of carbon footprints and USA immigrants. So here are your raw figures. You need to watch this video in collaboration with the website. I'll let you have a read through those figures. I'm not contesting or saying any of these figures are inaccurate, but just the sociological and political context of this, politicians at the time appeared to be using this information to criticize the migration of people into the United States, and even worse, criticize the migration of people who are refugees. So just some context to that. I'm not questioning the data here at all, but I'm questioning the way that the data has been used. Let's have a watch of this video.
My name is Leon Kalankowitz. I'm an environmental scientist, planner, and consultant whose work has included analyses of the environmental impacts of alternative energy technologies, including their greenhouse gas emissions. Along with Steve Camerata, Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies, I have co-authored a study just released by the center entitled Immigration to the United States and Worldwide Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Our study attempts to quantify the direct contribution of immigrants in the United States to increasing US and global carbon dioxide, or CO2, emissions. Since American emissions per capita are much higher than almost all of the immigrant sending countries, immigration to the United States has clear implications for worldwide emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions, the most important of which is CO2, raise the concentration of these gases in the Earth's atmosphere. Most scientists think this increase is causing average global temperatures to rise. There is widespread concern that warming in turn may trigger far-reaching long-term effects on the Earth's climate and biosphere, and consequently on human civilization. Thus, the impact of US immigration on annual CO2 emissions is an important research question.
Okay, hasn't he got a lovely tie there with a wolf on? So you can see where this video is going, and it's quite incredible where this video is going. So it's suggesting a good way for America to reduce its carbon footprint is to reduce the number of immigrants coming into the country. Of course, the video is going to not suggest that America changes its lifestyle, actually stops producing that carbon dioxide. It's suggesting a way forward for America to stop the growth of its carbon footprint is to reduce the number of immigrants. And also they have a global international responsibility to do this. It's quite incredible the way that this research has been twisted around to make a political statement.
A key premise of our study was that CO2 emissions are broadly correlated with income and economic activity, an assumption confirmed by experience and research across time and space. Major findings of our study include the following. The estimated CO2 emissions of the average immigrant, legal or illegal, in the United States are 18% less than those of the average native-born American. However, immigrants in the United States produce an estimated 4 times more CO2 in the United States as they would have in their countries of origin. US immigrants produce
Okay, so see the interesting use of statistics. He's tried to suggest that there is a balance here. You say that immigrants in general, because they're lower income, have a lower carbon footprint than the average American citizen. That's good. But we go back to this again, having a go at those immigrants and saying that is still larger than the footprint than if, for example, if they stayed in their home country. So again, the way this video is constructed is quite incredible. I'll leave you to have a look at that graph very briefly and think about the irony of this, of suggesting that immigration is a major concern when it comes to carbon footprint, and immigration for countries like America is a major environmental problem. Of course, if you think about it, what's actually far more significant is actually the carbon footprint presented by tourism. But the thing with tourism is that it's a vital part of the economy and lots of people make money out of it. So it's interesting that there's a slightly different way of looking at the carbon footprint of tourism, which is massive compared to the carbon footprint that is to be associated with immigration. Let's have a look at this video.
News Review from BBC Learning English. Hello and welcome to News Review, the program where we show you how to use the language from the latest news stories in your everyday English. I'm Dan, and joining me today is Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Dan.
So what's our story?
Our story today, Dan, is about the effects of tourism.
Okay, let's hear more from this BBC World Service news bulletin.
A new study says tourism accounts for 8% of global carbon emissions, about 3 times more than previously estimated. The report, published in the journal Nature, includes details on the carbon footprint linked to tourists' food, shopping and accommodation, as well as their travel.
So, a new report has concluded that previous estimates on how much carbon is created by tourists and tourism, those estimations were wrong. Now, carbon's really important. Carbon emissions.
Okay, so there we go. We can see that this study suggests that 8% of the world's global emissions are associated with tourism. Compare that to the global emissions that are created by immigrants, which we've looked at before. As a population movement, that is really, really small. So it's just interesting if you look at the balance of the videos and that incredible video that we watched previously. Very, very quickly, you can see that we can really change the way that we see the information. So on this map here, This map shows those carbon transfers that are associated with the travel and tourism industry. And, you know, these are absolutely massive. At 8%, it's one of the major polluters of the world. Another study here, which shows how difficult it is to measure these things, and there's different ways to measure it. And this study says that tourism-related emissions increased by around 15% in the study period. That's 2009 to 2013. So, barring a pandemic breakout, which we appear to be having at the moment with coronavirus, we can expect to see this industry growing even more and substantially each year. It's actually very hard to work out the carbon footprint, though, of tourism, and it really does depend how you measure it. Okay, so some things to have a think about here, guys. Do have a think about that incredible video about US immigration to the USA and the contribution that those immigrants make to the carbon footprint. That's a really good example of a video that takes information and uses it in a questionable way. We'll put it like that.